I think the thing that I wanted to chat to you about more importantly is, I mean, I think it's gathering pace. Is that people are still adamant about carbohydrates being really bad for you, and there's a big thing in the marketplace going at the moment, which is all about how we shouldn't push insulin at all high, and we should keep that super low at all times if we ever want to lose body weight. What I think a lot of these companies are doing are missing the mark big time in the fact that they're not really talking about health. They're only talking about fat loss and weight loss, and potentially maybe talking about keeping carbohydrates low for health. But there's a big mismatch between what they're trying to sell us and what's your take on it at the moment? How I think ultimately my first thing is that a lot of people that I coach when they first come on board are terrified of carbohydrates. So what would be really cool actually would be for you to maybe sort of, because I always talk about this with the guys and girls that I coach, it's like carbohydrates don't actually make you fat, and there's it's quite a mechanism to get it there. So maybe you could go into the details of that, so anybody listening go, oh, I get it, I finally get it.
Yeah, sure. I think, yeah, this whole demonization of carbohydrate, had really hoped had left us behind, but sadly not. Um, so I guess the first place to sort of start is looking at what carbohydrate is. And there's obviously two types of carbohydrate. You have your kind of complex carbohydrates, which are a structure, and hence they take a little bit longer to break down in the body, but they do break down to glucose. Um, and then you have your more kind of simple carbohydrates, which is fundamentally different types of sugar, whether that's fructose, whether that's sucrose, whether that's glucose, whatever form it is. And these are much more quickly digested by the body and turned into glucose. And the reason why the human body needs glucose is because it is the preferred currency of energy, particularly for the brain. So the brain really likes glucose. And actually, we have seen on many MRI scans and in studies that if you don't have enough glucose in it, then a lot of the pathways and sort of processes that occur in the brain can't happen as effectively and as efficiently. It's also why when you are hungry and your blood glucose is dropping, you find it so difficult to make sense and you get a bit irrational and maybe you can't even concentrate or even think of the word that you're trying to find because the brain can't work as effectively. So that's a really important thing to remember, is that the human body prefers glucose as its energy source. So it can get energy from other sources, but it prefers glucose because it's easy. So where carbohydrates start getting a bad press is that it can be very easy to over-consume those simple carbs. So the example I tend to give people is if we think about a bag of jelly babies that we might pick up when we're on a trip somewhere. A bag of jelly babies, family bag of jelly babies, will contain 152 grams of carbohydrate. That's quite a lot of carbohydrate to consume in one go, depending on your size of carbohydrate. It would be the equivalent of trying to eat three large baked potatoes. So if you think about it, if you're trying to sit there and eat three large baked potatoes, you're going to struggle, right? So the reason why this started to kind of get confused is that people just started to use the term carbohydrate, and then that created fear to eat bread and fear to eat pasta and fear to eat potatoes. And yet these foods are really important in our diet because not only do they provide us with energy and carbohydrate, but they also provide us cases with fiber, which is important for our gut biome. So yes, it is easy to overconsume easily digestible carbohydrates like sugar. But that also doesn't mean you should never have those either. It's just about being mindful of when you use them. So in sport, there are going to be definite times when easily digestible carbohydrates are more important. So, in just before a session, during an endurance session, to maintain that kind of carbohydrate intake so that you can maintain your pace, it's going to be important. But also in the immediate aftermath of a session, because actually, believe it or not, what you are trying to do is get insulin to rise at that point. So when we exercise, we actually sort of reduce our production of insulin, which is kind of normal. And then when you have finished exercising, what you're trying to do is recover and get energy back into the body as quickly as possible. And insulin has also had a really bad press. And insulin is a hormone that helps us to absorb nutrients, and not just glucose, by the way. It actually also is important for the absorption of protein and of fat to a certain degree as well. So if you are obsessed with protein, then you're only going to absorb the protein properly if you've actually allowed insulin to rise as well. So it's what I think has happened here, as with everything to do with nutrition, is that the information has been taken on board by someone with no scientific brain, with no qualifications in nutrition or science, or really truly understanding how the human body works, appreciating the complexity of the human body. And they have dumbed it right down and basically said, if you eat carbs, you'll put weight on. And it doesn't work like that. So when we consume, let's say we have our porridge for breakfast, what happens is our body absorbs the porridge for breakfast, it breaks it down into glucose, it stores what it can into our glycogen stores in our muscles, in our liver, and in our brain. And then whatever is maybe left over will be carried around in our bloodstream and used up for our daily movement during that time. And that can be used up fairly quickly. Like, as soon as you start walking, you're using energy. As soon as you're standing up, you're using energy fundamentally. It's only really when you're asleep, you're still using energy, but maybe not as much, to be fair, right? So it's not like if you eat carbs, you're suddenly going to put weight on. It's the sort of the age old, if you consume anything to excess of your overall needs, then over time, and I really want to stress that, it's not even in a day, it's not even in a week, we're talking about over a longer period of time, 10 days, 2 weeks, probably more like a month. If you don't get that overall balance correct, then yes, you start noticing that you put weight on potentially. But again, it's not even that is, I've simplified it down to kind of help people to understand. But fundamentally, we are not just energy in, energy out, because there's so many complex reactions that are going on in our body that need energy that actually you don't know how much energy you really need. So even though you might think, oh, well, I haven't done anything today, so I better not eat carbs, which is the general thing I hear in clinic all the time. Yeah, but you did train yesterday and your body is still recovering from that, and it needs the carbohydrate to, produce red blood cells. It needs the carbohydrate to bone health. It needs the carbohydrate to make sure that your hormones are working for you. Like, it's not just we need carbs when we move. We actually need good nutrition every day, throughout the day, to make sure that we can operate properly. It's just that we've become so fearful of, I suppose, weight is probably the best way to describe it. We've become so fearful of being overweight or becoming obese because we hear it all the time. That's all the media talks about is, the strain that people who are overweight and obese put on the NHS, the increase in prevalence of disease. And again, even that, yes, there is absolutely some truth in that, but also something like obesity in particular is a really complex endocrine condition. It's not just somebody who doesn't have control and doesn't know when to stop. It's complicated. And so I guess, yeah, it winds me up chronic, but carbs are really not the enemy. And they are so important for your brain, for your central nervous system, and also for your hormonal system. And if you want to perform well, you need all those three things to work well for you. Otherwise, you're not going anywhere.
To get the full episode on this video, click here.